Is he still in jail? Well, with a personality like that, it's no wonder. My son sneered, spitting out the words, and his wife beside him immediately chimed in. That's right. There's no way someone like that could live a normal life. You must have had it tough, Emily. Their blatant disdain made me bite my lip hard. It was clear from their attitude that they had no idea how much their son had struggled to turn his life around. Anger and sadness swirled within me. 15 years ago, they had dumped their son on me, practically forcing me to take him in. We're cutting ties with them, they had declared as they walked away. The retreating figures were still burned into my memory. My grandson had tried desperately to heal his wounded heart. But these two knew nothing of his efforts, and now they were acting like this. How could they be so cruel? I muttered this to myself, but I kept my expression neutral and took a deep breath to calm myself. He's doing well now, walking his own path. I responded in a low, calm voice, but my son and his wife exchanged glances and replied with a tone of mock surprise. Oh, really? And what kind of path is that? Their flippant attitude made my discomfort grow, but I knew that getting emotional here would only put me on the same level as them. Whatever path it is, it's none of your concern, I said quietly. The two of them fell silent for a moment, but then let out another laugh. Well, if you say so, Mom, I guess that's that. His words were dripping with contempt and disrespect. Just then a quiet engine sound came from behind me. I turned around to see a black Mercedes smoothly pulling up. The window slowly rolled down. My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 60 years old. I'm a widow living alone in a quiet suburban town, making ends meet through part-time work and my pension. My husband passed away when my son Andy was still young. I raised him single-handedly. I didn't want him to feel disadvantaged because he only had one parent. That thought drove me. I was also stubborn, not wanting others to pity me. But more than anything, I didn't want my son to struggle. I believed that raising him strictly was for his own good, but my son began to rebel against my strictness. By the time he was in middle school, a deep chasm had formed between us. Even when we sat around the dinner table, there was hardly any conversation. When I tried to start a conversation, my son would just say whatever and clam up. One day, my son suddenly said, I'm leaving town after I graduate from middle school. I was surprised by this sudden declaration and asked him why, but he wouldn't answer. He simply stated that he would be attending a high school with a dormitory. It was clear that he wanted to leave home, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything more. My son has the right to make his own choices, I repeated to myself, trying to accept the situation. After that, my son left our hometown and started living in a dorm. He would call occasionally, but it was just to give me a brief update, and the conversations would end quickly. The bond between us grew weaker, and I stopped interfering in his life. He'll probably go to college after graduating from high school, I believed. But my son betrayed my expectations and suddenly showed up at my doorstep. He had a large backpack slung over his shoulder, and beside him stood an unfamiliar young woman, Allison. Without any warning, my son declared, I'm getting married to her. We're having a baby. I was speechless. My mind went completely blank. The woman smiled brightly and said, Nice to meet you, in a casual tone. I was stunned by her carefree attitude, but somehow managed to regain my composure and asked my son, Marriage? Are you really sure about this? How are you going to support yourselves? My son replied nonchalantly, I'll start working right after high school. I already found a job. I won't let my wife struggle, so don't worry. Hearing his words didn't reassure me at all. Getting married and working right after graduating high school while raising a child seemed incredibly reckless. But seeing my son's determined expression, I couldn't say anything more. The fact that he came only to inform me, not to ask for my opinion, said it all. No matter how much I opposed it, his decision wouldn't change. My son and the woman left my house after a short while. After they were gone, I was left standing there alone. The weight of my helplessness, my inability to do anything about my son's choices, pressed heavily on my chest. Had my strict upbringing pushed my son away? That thought crossed my mind, and regret slowly spread through my heart. Still, I told myself that I shouldn't interfere any further in his life. They didn't have a wedding ceremony, and my son apparently told his wife's parents about the situation. He said they wouldn't be coming back to our hometown and were living about an hour away by train. I had no way of knowing what kind of life awaited them. All I could do was spend my days vaguely, worrying about my only son's future. I received the news that my grandson was born exactly a year after my son's marriage. It's a healthy baby boy, my son said over the phone, but it felt like an afterthought. After that call, my son, his wife, and my grandson Alex never visited me, not even once. I thought about going to see them, but I hesitated, fearing that my daughter-in-law might not like it. Besides, my son didn't seem to miss me either. I was convinced that my strict parenting had driven him away. Because of that, I just couldn't bring myself to intrude on their lives. I heard that Allison became a stay-at-home mom. My son was probably working to support the family. That was about all the information I had. I couldn't help but worry about Andy and how my grandson was growing up, but I feared that my involvement might create more problems. I felt that my strict attitude had distanced me from Andy, and I couldn't do anything about it. Then one day, I received a call from my son, which was unusual. "Mom, I need your help." Surprised by his plea, I listened carefully to what he had to say. Apparently, after starting elementary school, my grandson had been constantly getting into trouble. The school couldn't handle him, and my daughter-in-law was frequently called in. "Please, come and see for yourself." I had no reason to refuse my son's request. The next day, I visited their home. As soon as I opened the door, I saw toys and clothes scattered all over the floor. When I entered the living room, my grandson was jumping on the sofa. My daughter-in-law told him to be quiet, but he completely ignored her. My son was just sitting there, staring blankly at the TV, which was left on. "Mom, this kid just doesn't listen. I'm at my wit's end," my son complained. I turned to my grandson and said, "Hello." My grandson looked at me for a moment and then asked, "Grandma, who are you?" I was surprised by his boldness, even with strangers, but I answered calmly, "I'm your dad's mom, so that makes me your grandma." My grandson thought for a moment and then smiled innocently. "Then you are Grammy." Seeing his smile, I sensed a certain purity beneath his mischievous behavior. At my son's request, I stayed for a few days to help take care of my grandson. However, in that short time, I reached my physical limit. My grandson was truly a handful, causing trouble from morning till night, and the school called almost every day. I had to listen to explanations about his problematic behavior at school, and I was even called in with my daughter-in-law. When we got home, Andy and Allison couldn't hide their frustration. "Why is he so restless? He doesn't listen no matter how much I tell him." They vented their frustrations, and their interactions with their son became increasingly emotional. Sometimes they would even hit him, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Seeing this scene made my heart ache. It must be because my parenting style was wrong, I thought. I couldn't say anything to Andy and Allison about their struggles with raising their child. My grandson continued to act out, and even when I tried to talk to him, he would quickly change the subject. Still, I persisted in trying to have a conversation with him. I believed in the purity that lay within him. After a few days, it was time for me to return home. Before leaving, I told my exhausted son and daughter-in-law, "If anything happens, I'll be there to help. Don't hesitate to call." They looked slightly relieved, but didn't offer any words of gratitude. After that, Andy and Allison started calling me frequently. "He got called to the school again today," they would complain. "This kid just won't listen. I'm at my wit's end." They would ask for help. Sometimes they would ask me to talk to my grandson over the phone. "Grammy, today at school this happened." As I listened to my grandson's stories, I could sense that he was slowly starting to open up to me. To keep my grandson engaged, I researched topics that children might find interesting. As we continued our conversations, he started talking about his own interests. "Do you know about programming? I like it." I listened intently to his words. It was unexpected for an elementary school student to be interested in programming. "That's amazing. What kind of things do you want to do with it?" As I listened earnestly to my grandson's words, I could see his eyes sparkling. I offered words of encouragement as he spoke, thinking to myself, "This child has a talent that needs to be nurtured." However, my grandson's home environment remained chaotic. My son and daughter-in-law's complaints increased, and their conversations often devolved into blaming each other. Each time, all I could do was listen to their complaints in silence. By the time my grandson entered middle school, he was not only getting in trouble at school, but also with the police. Several times a year, I would visit their home, talk to my grandson, and listen to their complaints. When I was there, my grandson seemed calmer, but as soon as I left, he would apparently go back to his wild ways. Looking at Andy and Allison, I couldn't help but feel that they didn't understand their son at all. Have they ever even considered what this child is interested in? Such doubts crossed my mind and weighed heavily on my heart, but I wondered if I had the right to say anything, given how I had raised my own son so strictly. I felt like my past actions still held me captive. In the end, I couldn't muster the courage to intervene and could only watch my grandson grow up from afar. I felt frustrated with myself, worrying about his future, but unable to do anything more than watch from a distance. When my grandson turned 50 and was in his third year of middle school, I decided to send him a gift to celebrate his upcoming graduation. I also included $300 for Andy and Allison, hoping it would help with future education expenses and to show my appreciation for everything. That night, I received a call from my son, which was unusual. "Mom, thank you so much. This is really helpful." When I answered, the video call showed my son, daughter-in-law, and grandson. All three of them expressed their gratitude, and my grandson said, "Thank you, Grammy," with a big, happy smile. Seeing his smile made my heart ache. Maybe they're starting to change a little, I thought hopefully as I hung up. A few days later, I received another call from my son. "Mom, I have a favor to ask." His voice was unusually low and serious. He He explained that my grandson had been caught shoplifting and was currently being held at the police station. Neither of us can go pick him up today. Could you go instead? I felt a wave of disappointment and anger. I was shocked that my grandson had shoplifted, but I was also deeply saddened by Andy and Allison's irresponsible attitude. Still, I couldn't just leave my grandson there. I quickly boarded a train and rushed to the police station. When I arrived at the station, my grandson, whose name is Alex, was sitting quietly on a chair, but there was a shadow of unease on his face. Alex, what were you thinking? When I asked him, he looked away awkwardly. The police officer explained that this was Alex's first offense, and the store owner had agreed not to press charges. Don't let it happen again, the store clerk said sternly. I paid for the stolen item on the spot and bowed deeply. I'm truly sorry. He won't cause any more trouble. The clerk, seeing I was the grandmother, softened his expression. You must be the grandmother. There are probably family issues at play here, but please support your grandson. His gentle words made my chest tighten. I took Alex back to my son's house, but the lights were off. They're not back yet? I wondered. I had Alex unlock the door and we went inside. When I turned on the lights, I was met with a devastating sight. The room was a complete mess, with trash and belongings scattered everywhere, and the shelves were empty. I frantically checked the entire house, only to find that all of Andy and Allison's personal belongings, valuables, and anything of worth were gone. What's going on? I was desperately trying to understand the reality before me. My legs felt weak, and I leaned against the wall for support. A cold dread gripped my heart, and the words, "This can't be happening," echoed in my mind. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. Just then, Alex quietly stood before me and held out his phone, his hand trembling. Grammy, this. His voice was strained. I looked at the screen, and my eyes widened in disbelief. We're cutting ties with you. Live with Grammy from now on. That one cold sentence pierced my heart like a sharp blade. My vision blurred, and I felt a burning sensation behind my eyes. I struggled to breathe. This is a lie, right? My whispered words were a soliloquy, unheard by anyone. My son, he wouldn't do this. I tried to convince myself, but the reality was undeniable. My son and his wife had abandoned Alex. There was no denying it. Why would they do this? My voice cracked, and tears threatened to spill over. I tried to stand firm, but my body felt frozen. As if reading my mind, Alex suddenly exploded. This is unbelievable. Why do I have to go through this? With a yell, Alex started throwing and destroying things around him. A vase on a shelf fell to the floor and shattered into pieces. He kicked the wall with all his might and overturned a table. His actions were a violent outburst of anger and sorrow. Live with Grammy? What a joke! He just threw me away! Alex's screams echoed through the room, each word stabbing at my heart. The sight of a 15-year-old boy releasing his emotions so violently was heartbreaking. More than anything, I felt a surge of fear and almost took a step back. Alex's furious actions were beyond anything I could handle. Alex, stop! I yelled, my voice trembling, but my words were swallowed up by his rage. Alex's rampage intensified, destroying more and more objects around him. My heart pounded like a drum, and my body froze, unable to move. But I couldn't miss the look of despair in his eyes. Alex, stop it! Nothing will change if you do that! My voice shook as I pleaded with him, but doubt swirled in my mind. What could I possibly do in this situation? There was no way I could physically stop a 15-year-old boy's strength. But I couldn't just stand by and watch him. At that moment, I shook off my fear and lunged at Alex's back. Stop it! I know you're hurting. Grammy understands. Alex seemed surprised for a moment, but immediately struggled, trying to shake me off. But I held on with all my might, clinging to him and embracing him. I can't just say it'll be okay, but Grammy is here. I won't abandon you, I promise. I could feel my own voice trembling. Alex resisted fiercely, trying to break free from my embrace, shaking his body. Each time he moved, my body swayed, and I nearly lost my balance. I might fall and get injured or even break a bone, but I held him tight with all my strength. Alex, please, don't hurt yourself anymore. My voice was choked with emotion, and I could feel tears streaming down my cheeks. I prayed that my tears would somehow reach his heart as I struggled to find the right words. Gradually, Alex's movements weakened, and he leaned his weight against me. Grammy, why am I so messed up? His voice was trembling, as if squeezed from the depths of his heart. You're not messed up. You've been trying so hard. I gently stroked his head as I spoke. I could feel Alex's body trembling, his shoulders shaking. Soon, sobs escaped his lips, and hearing them made me unable to hold back my own tears. Alex's cries and my tears echoed softly in the room. I held him close, feeling my own tears fall. It's okay, Alex. Grammy's here with you now. I whispered, my voice trembling. Alex nodded slightly. I'm sorry, Grammy. I didn't know what to do. The pain in his voice resonated in my chest, making my heart ache. It's okay. You don't have to say sorry. Let's figure things out together from now on. I gently stroked his trembling back as I spoke. Alex buried his face in my shoulder and continued to cry softly. My heart was filled with a deep love for him. At the same time, anger towards my son and his wife and regret for my own helplessness swirled within me. But I made a silent vow to do everything in my power to protect this child. That determination quietly solidified in my heart at that moment. The next morning, I contacted a real estate agency. The agent on the phone sounded apologetic. I'm sorry to tell you this, but the rent for this property is 2 months overdue. Hearing those words, I let out a deep sigh. This confirmed that Andy and Allison had planned their escape. I'll pay the outstanding balance, I said, but anger and sadness churned inside me. They ran away, leaving this child behind, after falling behind on rent and abandoning everything. How could they do such a thing? My hand trembled as I gripped the phone. After dealing with a real estate agency, I headed to Andy and Allison's house. When I opened the front door, I was met with the same devastating scene from the day before. I sighed and had no choice but to start cleaning up. As I tidied up the room, I came across things that Andy and Allison had left behind. Old report cards, photo frames, and letters of warnings from school. Each item was a stark reminder of how little they cared for Alex. They ignored so many warning letters. I picked up a piece of paper with details regarding Alex's behavior problems. Due to frequent disruptive behavior at school, we urgently request the parents' cooperation. When I saw those words, it felt like they were blaming me. In his old report card, there was a comment that read, Alex is a bright and cheerful child. This was a stark contrast to who he was now. I held the report card close and closed my eyes, breathing quietly. What must you have been feeling all this time? I asked, but there was no answer. As I went further into the house, I found a dusty photo album. When I opened it, I saw many pictures of a young, smiling Alex. He was so innocent. The smiles in the photos were a world away from the Alex of today. As I turned the pages, I noticed there were no family photos. Instead, there were only landscape pictures. What kind of presents did family have for this child? I felt a heavy tightening sensation in my chest as I stared at the photos. As I continued cleaning, Andy and Allison's calculated actions became apparent. They had taken only their belongings, leaving behind all records and memories of their family. How much loneliness must Alex have endured in this house? Sadness, anger, and my own sense of powerlessness swirled within me in a complex mix. By the time I finished cleaning, I received a call from the real estate agency. Regarding the remaining furniture, may we have your permission to dispose of it? Yes, I answered quietly. It felt like the heavy weight of the past was gradually lifting. I carefully selected Alex's belongings from among the things that were left behind. I wanted to protect the things that were important to him, to somehow connect with his heart. When I finally handed over the room, there was hardly any trace left of a family ever having lived there. This is really the end, I muttered as if to convince myself. That evening, I returned to my home with Alex. When I opened the front door, the familiar quiet air welcomed us. Alex, this is our home now. I smiled at Alex, but his face still held deep sadness. But it's okay. We'll start over together, here. I silently vowed, gently patting his shoulder. A new life began, and I was determined to cherish each day with Alex. Alex was rough around the edges at first, but he gradually started to open up to me. Grammy, why did my parents ever look at me? One day, Alex suddenly asked. The question made my chest ache. It's not that they didn't look at you, they just weren't able to understand your feelings properly. When I answered, Alex fell into a thoughtful silence. Knowing that Alex was interested in programming, I decided to believe in and support his talent. I bought him a computer and enrolled him in a programming class. Grammy, is this really okay? When Alex asked with a surprised look, I smiled and replied, my job is to fully support what you want to do. Hearing those words, Alex's eyes lit up and he threw himself into his studies. Alex's new life also significantly changed my own way of thinking. As I watched over him, I reflected on my past parenting style and realized the importance of showing affection. Alex steadily honed his programming skills, and after graduating from high school, he landed a job at a top-tier IT company. A few years later, Alex started his own IT company, developed a unique application, and achieved success. Grammy, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. When Alex said that, I couldn't hold back my tears. It's because you worked hard. Grammy only helped a little. Remembering the difficult days of 15 years ago, I felt truly proud of his growth. One day, Alex and I were in the lobby of a luxury hotel. Alex had given me a gift of an overnight stay and dinner. As I sat on a lobby sofa, fiddling with my phone, I suddenly stood up. My eyes had caught sight of two familiar figures, my son and his wife. They looked a little awkward, but greeted me with a long time no see. For a moment, memories of the past flashed through my mind, but I shook them off and offered a slight smile. It has been a while. They were dressed in what appeared to be designer suits and coats, but they looked somewhat cheap, and their strained lifestyle was evident. Without me asking, my son started talking. We were at a gathering with some high school friends. He spoke hurriedly, and it was obvious he was trying to put on airs. I simply nodded and said, "A curt, well then," and tried to leave the lobby, but my son and his wife rushed after me. "Wait a minute, Mom. It's rare to see you at such a fancy hotel. What are you doing here?" My son looked at me curiously as he asked. "Alex treated me to a night's stay," I replied curtly. Hearing my words, the two looked surprised for a moment, but quickly masked it with scornful smiles. "As a thank you for your part-time job?" my daughter-in-law asked sarcastically. I frowned slightly at her attitude, but kept my expression neutral as I answered, "That's right, thanks." I tried to leave again, but my son hurriedly followed, continuing to talk. "You seem to be doing well, Mom. You look stylish, too." My daughter-in-law chimed in with a chuckle. I calmly replied, "Oh, really?" But something fell off. My son and daughter-in-law pressed further. "Did you get a raise? Or did you find a full-time job somewhere?" The way they were probing for the reason behind my supposed financial comfort, I finally understood their intention. "Oh, I see," I muttered to myself, purposely giving a curt response. Nothing's changed, really. My answer clearly confused them. Just then, my son suddenly laughed from behind me. "Is he still in jail?" At first, I didn't understand who he was referring to. But then the memory of Alex being taken to the police station 15 years ago flashed through my mind, and I grasped the intent behind my son's words. Beside him, my daughter-in-law snickered and added her own jab. "It must be tough taking care of that kid. Is that why you got a raise? Or maybe a full-time job?" Her tone was dripping with sarcasm and contempt. I took a deep breath and glared at them. "Stop talking about Alex like that." My words made Andy and Allison flinch, but my daughter-in-law quickly recovered, smirking as she responded. "Why are you so angry? I just asked a question." Her attitude poured fuel on the fire of my anger. "You should be ashamed of yourselves." I struggled to keep my voice from rising, maintaining a calm facade as I spoke. Just then a Mercedes quietly stopped in front of us. The window opened and a familiar voice called out, "Sorry to keep you waiting, Grammy." Alex, dressed in a fine suit, looked at us with a dignified expression. Seeing his appearance, I felt a warmth spread through my chest. I wasn't waiting long. I smiled and answered, starting to walk slowly towards the car. "Bye, then," I said casually, opening the car door. Then Andy and Allison rushed over, grabbing the window frame and questioning us. "Wait a minute. What's going on? Alex, what is this?" Their eyes were wide with a mixture of surprise and panic, their desperation evident. Alex calmly answered, his expression unchanging. "I now own my own company. I'm treating Grammy to dinner tonight as a thank you for everything." With that one sentence, their faces turned even paler. "A CEO?" my son muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. In that instant, Andy and Allison's attitude changed dramatically. "Alex, you've done so well. Your grandmother's upbringing must have been excellent after all." My son forced a smile as he spoke, and his wife quickly added, "It's truly amazing. We're so proud of you." Hearing their words, Alex and I exchanged a brief glance. Our eyes reflected the same question and a shared sense of irony. "Mom, actually, I have a serious illness." My son suddenly changed his expression to one of grave concern. "The medical bills are piling up and our finances are tight," his wife added, her voice trembling, feigning sadness. "I have to work too, but I was a stay-at-home mom for so long I don't have any skills." The two of them went on and on about their supposed hardships over the past 15 years, indirectly asking for financial assistance. As Alex and I listened, we were utterly dumbfounded. "You won't do something terrible like abandoning your parents, right?" My daughter-in-law looked at me with teary eyes. I stared back at her with cold eyes and quietly spoke. "What are you saying after you abandoned your own son?" My son and daughter-in-law froze at my words. "If you need money, why don't you sell those fancy brand-name coats and suits?" I added. They looked flustered and stammered. "Well, that's..." As I calmly observed them, I realized that the things they were wearing were fakes. "I see." I sighed inwardly, but didn't say it out loud. Alex spoke up, sounding slightly troubled. "I apologize for any trouble we've caused you." My son and daughter-in-law's faces lit up with expectation at his words. "But You're the ones who cut ties with me first, aren't you? I still have the email." Their expressions instantly darkened. My son and daughter-in-law became visibly agitated by Alex's calm assertion. We had our reasons at the time." My son raised his voice, trying to make excuses. "It's in the past," his wife added. But Alex remained unfazed, his demeanor calm. "If you truly had your reasons, we should have tried to find a solution together, right?" Hearing those words, Andy and Allison fell completely silent, unable to say a word. Alex continued. "After consulting with Grammy, I had the legal paperwork done after I became an adult, so legally we are no longer related." Upon hearing that explanation, Andy and Allison were momentarily stunned. "Without your parents' permission, doing something so underhanded, it's unforgivable," my son yelled, but Alex calmly responded. "You abandoned your son without a second thought, but the minute you find out I'm a CEO, you come crawling back, begging for money. Isn't that unforgivable?" His voice was filled with barely suppressed anger and deep sadness. "You should be ashamed of yourselves." In that instant, I raised my voice. The sound echoed through the hotel lobby, causing people around us to turn and look. My son and daughter-in-law flinched and froze in place. Taking advantage of their shock, Alex quietly started the car. "I have nothing more to do with you. Goodbye." Through the window, Alex delivered his final words, cold yet resolute. My son and daughter-in-law were yelling something, but their voices were drowned out by the car's engine. Sitting in the passenger seat, I took a deep breath and turned to look at Alex's profile. "Thank you, Alex. I'm so glad you're here." Alex glanced at me and smiled. "Grammy, I'm here because you were there for me." The car was filled with a quiet sense of peace, a stark contrast to the turmoil of 15 years ago. With smiles on our faces, we headed to the luxury hotel for our dinner. A few days later, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Andy and Allison were standing there. "Mom, can we talk for a minute?" My son's face was gaunt, and his voice lacked its usual energy. I invited them into the living room, and my son began to speak, looking apologetic. "Actually, my illness has relapsed, and I don't have enough money for the medical bills." My heart ached at his words. An illness, and a relapse at that? It was indeed a serious matter, but the words that followed pulled me back to reality. "So could you borrow some money from Alex?" Hearing that, something inside me snapped. "You want to rely on Alex?" I tried to remain calm, but my voice came out sharp. "After everything you did, you have the nerve to rely on the child you abandoned?" My son and daughter-in-law looked down, shamefaced. "I know, Mom, but I really need the money." My son's voice was filled with desperation. His wife also pleaded, tears in her eyes. "Please, we're truly sorry. Just this once, please help us." Seeing them like this, my heart wavered. No matter how much they had hurt me, my son was still my child and his wife was family. "Let me talk to him a little," I said, trying to sound calm, but inside, a complex conflict raged. Was it right for a mother to turn her back on her son? But their attitude, trying to rely on Alex, was something I couldn't fully accept. The next day, I talked to Alex about it. He thought for a while, then spoke, carefully choosing his words. "If he's really sick, it wouldn't be right not to help, but we need to make sure." I deeply agreed with Alex's calm suggestion. "You're right. I'll ask for more details." The following day, I invited Andy and Allison to my house to hear them out. My son initially spoke calmly, but when I asked about the specific symptoms and diagnosis of his illness, he suddenly became evasive. "So which hospital did you go to?" When I asked, my son's eyes darted around as he answered. A clinic nearby." "Do you have a doctor's note?" When I pressed further, his wife hastily interjected. We haven't got it yet." At that moment, I knew. There was no truth in their words, no illness to speak of. My son's gaze dropped to the floor, and his wife nervously tried to come up with more excuses. But seeing them like this, I was at a loss for words. "To think you would lie about being sick to try to get money." My voice trembled as I managed to squeeze out the words. "Do you have any idea how terrible that is?" My son and daughter-in-law remained silent, unable to meet my gaze, heads bowed. Their silent figures etched a deep sadness into my heart. "That's enough. Don't ever come here again." I stood up quietly and turned my back to them. "Mom, wait!" My son's hand reached my back, but it held no weight. I opened the front door without looking back. "Go home," I said coldly. With that one sentence, the two finally stood up and left my house in silence. After the sound of the door closing echoed, I exhaled deeply. My love for my son and my anger at their actions intertwined and swirled silently within me. A few days later, shocking news about Alex's company began to spread on social media. Articles with titles like famous IT CEO's troubled past were posted one after another. The posts included records of Alex's police involvement and insinuations about his shoplifting incident. They even included photos of him looking mischievous as a child and copies of his old report cards. What is this? I stared at the screen, and I immediately realized where it had come from. They were the items that Andy and Allison had taken when they left the house. How could they? Anger welled up inside me, and the reality that Alex's past was being exposed made my chest tighten. Rumors about Alex spread like wildfire on social media, and the situation became even more serious. Baseless accusations like he was violent and he hung out with dangerous people were posted one after another. Not only that, but the fact that he had been abandoned by his real parents was also exposed. Why is this happening? I was in shock, unable to speak, and I couldn't stop my hands from trembling. The media swarmed Alex's company, and TV news showed them hounding employees as they came and went. At this rate, that child will be... I turned off the TV, feeling a deep sense of despair. Around that time, Alex's company stock price temporarily plummeted by 30%, and there were even calls for a boycott. Furthermore, I became self-conscious about the neighbors' stares and hesitated to even leave the house. Alex was understandably exhausted. He tried to smile in front of me, but his slumped shoulders cast a heavy shadow. "Don't worry, Grammy. I'm fine." He said that, but I could hear over the phone that employees were quitting one after another, and seeing him so disheartened was painful. I couldn't protect him again. I blamed myself, and the feeling of guilt grew stronger. The media stalked our house, and the prank calls and hateful graffiti increased, pushing me to my mental limit. But I couldn't break down. I have to be strong for Alex, I told myself, forcing a smile and resolving to support him. I took every possible measure. I unplugged the TV and the landline and turned off my cell phone. I only went shopping late at night or early in the morning when there were fewer people around. At home, to avoid the paparazzis, I kept the curtain closed and lived quietly as if holding my breath. Even so, the anxiety and stress never left me. Alex, we have to overcome this situation somehow. I decided to do everything I could for him. Then one day, Alex said to me with a serious expression, "Grammy, I think I'm going to hold a press conference." I was surprised by his words and looked at him with concern. "Are you sure you'll be okay?" When I asked, he nodded deeply and continued, "Instead of running away, I want to tell the truth from my own mouth." I felt his strong determination and his resolve. On the day of the press conference, the venue was packed with media, and it was broadcast live nationwide. As I watched on screen, I felt my heart pounding. Alex appeared in a suit, looking calm, and stood before the cameras. He bowed deeply and then quietly began to speak. "There's something I want to tell everyone." With those words, the atmosphere in the venue instantly became tense. Alex began to honestly confess his past. "When I was young, my parents practically neglected me. I acted out to get their attention, caused trouble, and made a lot of people worry." His confession was filled with regret and gratitude. "But when I was caught shoplifting, my parents abandoned me, and my grandmother took me in. Without her support, I wouldn't be who I am today." His words delivered through the screen silenced the entire venue. Alex continued, "I was able to reflect and reform myself thanks to my grandmother. And from now on, I plan to donate a portion of our sales to orphanages and other facilities for children who, like me, weren't blessed with supportive parents." The moment I heard his determination, my chest tightened, and tears welled up in my eyes. Alex's sincere confession and his strong commitment to social contribution deeply resonated with me, even through the screen. After the press conference, social media was filled with praise for Alex's honest attitude. "He's truly admirable. I'm moved by his strength to overcome his past." Such comments overflowed, and Alex's reputation gradually recovered. But a new question arose in my mind. Who was behind this attack? To dispel this lingering doubt, I hired a private investigator to uncover the truth. A few days later, I was shocked when I read the investigator's report. The source of the information that triggered the attacks was your son and his wife. I was speechless when I saw that sentence. It was also revealed that their claims of seeking financial aid due to illness were false. In reality, they had massive debts due to their extravagant spending, and the luxurious brand name suits and coats were rented to keep up appearances. How could they? My body trembled at Andy and Allison's cruel actions and their attempt to ruin Alex's life. Further investigation revealed that Andy and Allison had borrowed a portion of their debt from loan sharks. Their actions were consistently reckless and showed no thought for the future. It was also discovered that the individuals claiming to be Alex's acquaintances who had fueled the online attacks had no connection to Alex whatsoever and were simply malicious pranksters. I gripped the report tightly, feeling a deep sense of despair, but also a strong conviction that the truth had to be revealed. A few days after Alex's press conference, the owner and staff of the store where Alex had shoplifted years ago, along with others, began to express their support for him on social media. He has overcome his past. He is a fine young man now. The business community also praised Alex's integrity and commitment to social contribution. As a result, Alex's company's stock price started to recover, and the boycott movement gradually subsided. As the online attacks died down and Alex's sincerity gained wider acceptance, a sense of relief began to spread through me. The media gradually shifted their focus to Andy and Allison, chasing after them relentlessly. Why did you spread such information? What was the reason for abandoning your own son? Bombarded with questions, they could only run and hide, their faces covered. Eventually, news started to spread that Andy and Allison were drowning in debt and their lives were falling apart. On the other hand, Alex's company was recognized as a business that had overcome a crisis, and many offers of support poured in. After the online attacks completely subsided, Alex and I discussed our options and decided to file a lawsuit against Andy and Allison and those who had participated in the slander. I could no longer forgive them. With that resolve, we began legal proceedings through a lawyer. While preparations for the lawsuit were underway, the lawyer contacted me with unbelievable news. Andy and Allison had apparently flown into a rage and assaulted the lawyer during a meeting, resulting in their arrest. What are they doing? I was exasperated, but at the same time, I felt a deep sadness that my own son had fallen so far. News of the incident somehow leaked onto social media and was eventually picked up by television news. Andy and Allison of IT firm CEO arrested for assaulting lawyer, their true nature exposed. I instinctively covered my eyes when I saw the news headline. Word of the incident reached Andy and Allison's workplaces and they were immediately fired. They brought this on themselves, I thought, but I also felt a sense of pity for them. However, to protect Alex's future, I was determined to see the lawsuit through to the end. Andy and Allison lost all their assets to pay compensation and were further pursued by debt collectors. It was reported that they then vanished as if fleeing in the night, and their whereabouts became unknown. They had denied being a family and destroyed everything. Was this the end they had reached? Even knowing this, I couldn't help but feel complicated emotions toward them. Meanwhile, Alex's company not only overcame the crisis, but used it as an opportunity for growth, achieving even greater success. His commitment to social contribution was highly praised, and Alex himself became a prominent figure in the media. The products of Alex's company regained popularity, the stock price steadily recovered, and employees began to return, revitalizing the company. Grammy, things have finally calmed down. I felt immense relief seeing Alex's calm demeanor as he spoke those words. Our home, too, returned to a peaceful routine, with quiet days passing by. As I spent time with Alex, I reflected on my past strict parenting and the lost bond between parent and child, striving to make up for it with deep affection. Alex, let's keep moving forward together. One evening, I said this to Alex. Alex smiled a little shyly and replied, "Of course, Grammy, I have you with me." His gentle response filled my heart with warmth. The scars of the past will never completely disappear, but having overcome them, I'm confident that we can now walk forward with hope. The figures of Andy and Allison, who were once antagonists, were now nothing more than a lesson in our memories. I made a firm decision to move forward, focusing only on our new future together, just the two of us.